What's up, guys? Doing a video on something I realized about the phrase or the book, I guess, The Lord of the Flies. I remember this story from either elementary school or middle school. I don't remember much about it, but I remember it was like part of the school curriculum, and maybe it was for you guys too. And there's just something I found out recently in how it relates to like religion, because that's what I spend most of my time studying now, is like stories, fictional stories, religious stories, mythology, and what those things mean spiritually, scientifically, psychologically, emotionally, and see if I can really kind of like bridge all those gaps and have them make sense. And Lord of the Flies. So something I found out. In theological sources predominantly Christian, Beelzebub is sometimes another name for the devil, similar to Satan. He is known in demonology as one of the 7 princes of hell. The Dictionnaire Infernal describes Beelzebub as being capable of flying, known as the Lord of the Flyers or the Lord of the Flies. I never knew that. So another name for Satan, or at least one of the demons of hell, one of the princes of hell, is Beelzebub. And I knew that much, but I knew Beelzebub was a reference to Satan, but I didn't know he had a nickname called the Lord of the Flies. And here, I'm going to keep this video short because I don't remember a lot about the story. It's just something interesting that I'm now finding out about it that I definitely didn't know as a kid. And if you know more about that story, if you know a lot about that story, there's deep insights you could get out of it, probably based on what I'm telling you now. So here's an artistic depiction of Beelzebub, obviously as a fly, and he's got a skull and crossbones on his wings. Kind of like the 322 Skull and Bones George Bush fraternity, Harvard or Yale frat house thing, the Skull and Bones, or you can just think of it as like death, obviously. Why depicted as a fly, I don't know. If you think of a fly as like an insect, they're pretty nasty, I guess. They swarm dead bodies, they swarm around crap like shit. There's a biblical phrase like we love the darkness and hate the light. Basically, we gravitate towards what's negative, to put it mildly, or bad, because we don't we avoid the truth because we don't want to be told that we're wrong. We don't want to discover that we're wrong or doing something wrong. We don't want to have our behavior corrected. So we love the darkness and hate the light. We hate the truth. And I'm kind of maybe making something out of nothing, but flies, they swarm around crap. They don't swarm around the good. Anyways, it's just weird. Lord of the Flies was a name for Satan. And here's some spark notes on the Lord of the Flies. I'll read it to you. Physically, the Lord of the Flies is the pig the pig head that Jack, Roger, and the hunters mount on a sharpened stick and leave as an offering for the beast. So that's kind of significant right there, the beast. The head is described as dripping blood, eerily grinning and attracting a swarm of buzzing flies. When the Lord of the Flies quotation speaks to Simon, we can assume that his voice is a hallucinatory effect of Simon's disintegrating mental state. The Lord of the Flies suggests to Simon that the boys will be their own undoing. Simon loses consciousness after the episode and is killed later that night. Later, when Roger and Jack vow to hunt and kill Ralph, they imply that they will repeat their offering to the beast using Ralph's head this time. Symbolically, the Lord of the Flies represents the evil in each one of the boys on the island. So, I think I'm at a point now where I think religious stories go deeper than like metaphors and stuff, but that sort of thing is hugely significant. It applies to our lives in every single way. It applies to history. It applies to our individual, personal, mundane lives. Um, to think about what these ideas mean psychologically, like, is it really so like eye rolling and scoffing to think about Satan as a personification of evil? You know what I mean? Like, people really can't like get on board with even that. I mean, a lot of people can, man, but so many people absolutely roll their eye. And I don't understand how you can go and watch movies and appreciate fiction and story and mythology and religion and cartoons and heroes and villains if you can't appreciate religious stories. Because all those things are really old. They're as old as us. Probably older than us. And yeah, so the Lord of the Flies represents the evil inside each one of the boys on the island. Another thing to point out was, where does it say? The Lord of the Flies suggests to Simon that the boys will be their own undoing. So that's another thing that people have a problem with. Basically, the devil never made you do anything. You did it all along. Like, the devil, you remember, like, depictions of, like, selling your soul in, like, movies? The devil always made them sign a contract. He didn't, like, hold a gun to their head and be like, oh, sign the contract. Like, they did it of their own will. The boys' will be their own undoing. We get in our own way. Tyrants rule through our permission. People can grease the skids for our weaknesses, like how I've talked about basically governmental drug trafficking, like CIA drug trafficking into the United States. They can do all these. They can have celebrities endorse a certain lifestyle of drug abuse. They can ship the drugs in themselves and profit on it. But at the end of the day, you yourself still need to get the lighter and light the crack pipe, or you still need to put the needle in your arm. You know what I mean? They never made you do anything that you weren't complicit in. And the boys will be their own undoing. If another way to think about it is Dracula. In classic Dracula stories, you have to invite him in. I know it's such a stupid rule, but it makes sense when you think about it, like, I don't know, psychologically or emotionally or spiritually, like, you have to let the bloodsucker in. He has to be invited in. Another thing to think about him with vampires, too, is they don't see their own reflection. So they're never, like, I don't know, there's probably a bunch of ways you can interpret that, but obviously the first one that comes to mind would be, like, they're incapable of being, like, self-critical, I guess. And that makes it sound, like, good. Like, oh, like, why are you being so hard on yourself? But, like, they're incapable of seeing themselves and, like, a flaw in themselves. They'd basically be incapable of recognizing that the evil is inside of them. You know what I mean? Or that they could do something wrong. It's just again, I don't remember this story hardly at all, because it's been like over 10 years probably since I've even encountered this story, and it's just something I discovered, and that was never brought to my attention as a kid, probably because, like, you can't even mention the word God in school, and I guess, I don't know, I don't know, I don't have anything to say about that, I guess, but they didn't tell me that the Lord of the Flies was Satan, and that's who it is. It's Beelzebub, and it represents the evil of each one of the boys on the island, and they'll be their own doing. And yeah, I don't know. We can assume that his voice is a hallucinatory effect of Simon's disintegrating mental state. So, as people get more desperate and things like that, I'm just kind of reading into it now, and as people get more desperate and hopeless, Satan's foot in the door gets a little easier. But anyways, the main things to take away from it is that the devil himself tells them that they'll be their own undoing. That he's not going to do anything that they weren't willing to do already. And that's actually more troubling, because I would love to just put all the problems of the world on Satan's shoulders, but it's kind of like, it's kind of depressing when because you would like to think that people are just being controlled. You know, like, oh, they didn't really want to do that. They're just being controlled. But the sad truth is, and that would actually make it better, because then you could be like, oh, people are good, and they were just being controlled. They didn't want to do that. But it's actually worse when you realize, when you take responsibility and realize that people do things out of their own will. Obviously, there's deception involved and stuff, like I pointed out earlier with the drug pushing analogy, but I don't know. Anyways, that's just something I wanted to show you guys. Thanks for listening. That's all I gotta say. It's already going on longer than I wanted it to.